Hey there guys, welcome back to ARTFX Tutorial Tuesday, Season 2 about glitch hop. Today we're gonna make an interesting bass sound. We're gonna make a kill the noise style bass that can be used in a lot of different ways, and you can make it sound like anything else. It's just that the character of the bass is pretty much similar to a bass that Kill the Noise has used in the past. Before I start actually going into Ableton, showing you around how this patch works, I want to show you that on my website I've been doing a lot of stuff. I've been adding a lot of new functions to the website itself, and you can now see I've got a VIP area. So when I click that, it's going to take me to the VIP subscription page, and you can see that you can get access to the VIP membership for €9.99. The membership is 2 months. And within those 2 months, you can download any file that's in the download area. When you subscribe, you get 15% discount on your first subscription if you follow me on Twitter, like my Facebook page, and +1 me on Google+. You get a 5% discount for each one of those, so in total that will be a 15% discount on your first purchase. There's going to be a lot more coming up, a lot more additional stuff like VIP articles, additional tutorial videos just for VIP members, and there's going to be a lot more stuff like that coming up soon. So if you want to be a part of this, subscribe now, and I'll basically just give you a little brief preview of what you're going to get. So when I log in, you can now see when I go to VIP area that we've also got VIP downloads right now. So when I click VIP downloads, it'll take you to the actual download area. You can see right now I've got Ableton Rex and Ableton Instruments. There's going to be massive presets, sample packs, and whatnot in this particular category. But right now, let's go to the Ableton Rex. Here you can actually see all the individual Rex that I have on this website available for download. If you click this file name, it'll take you to a futures page with details about what is in the plugin, what does it do, and how it works. Give you a little bit of information about the futures and some installation instructions, and down below you've got a download button. So that is basically the first thing that's now available for VIP members. I'm gonna do a lot more stuff for my members. There's gonna be more on the forum soon, and if you have any requests for the VIP area, please let me know. Also, if you are on the checkout page and you see that you're not getting all the discounts, even though you're already following me on Twitter or whatnot, then please just contact me by sending me an email by clicking this particular knob in the menu. I'll get back at you as soon as possible and give you the additional discounts that you still need to get. That being said, I think it's time now to go into Ableton, and I'm going to show you today how to make a Kill the Noise style bass patch. I'm gonna use Massive for this, and as you can see, all my knobs are already set at particular positions. I'm not gonna redo all these positions because that would take, well, quite a lot of time, because there's a lot of tweaking in this particular patch, and you need to tweak everything a little bit to get everything sounding right. Now, if you don't want to follow along and if you just want the preset, then I would advise you to get your membership today, because I'm gonna be uploading this preset as a massive preset in the VIP download section. So let's get started. Right here I've now got a, well, basically a really basic setup. I've took out everything except all the settings for the knobs. So every knob is set at the position that it's going to end up in the final sound, but I've taken off all the modulation. I've basically set everything to a square saw again. So this is basically just how a patch would come up when you click File, New Sound, but then the only difference is that all the knobs are set to different positions, and thus it will sound a little bit different. to be honest, you're not hearing anything. You see? I've also got a MIDI clip in here with some really basic notes. I'm only using 5 notes in this particular melody, and these are all notes coming from the D sharp major scale, like I talked about in earlier videos. I've also got all my other tracks up here with all the other stuff I created in the previous videos. I basically just took them all out because I want to focus on the drop section first, and I basically have laid down some interesting melody parts. I've got some percussion, I've got some interesting chops, I've got a slap bass and some piano chords, and I can basically just start working on drop now and basically just implement everything one by one, making it sound right and creating the final track. Let's go back into Massive and start setting up this patch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the amount of voices to 4, and I'm gonna set the voicing mode to mono rotate and the trigger to legato triller. So what this does is that when you now play one note and then play the next note without stopping the first note, so you play one note and then the next one, it's going to glide between those two notes. When I would set it to polyphonic, you play one note and then another note and you get a chord. I don't want chords, I want monophonic notes. So I'm gonna set this to legato triller. The difference between legato triller and legato is that when you use legato, every time you play a second note, the first note is gonna be cut off. And on legato triller, every time you play a second note, it bends up to that second note, and when you then let that second note go while still holding the first note, it will drop back down. So I'm gonna show you that. As you can hear, I play one note, and then the second note, and it glides up, and then I release that second note while still holding the first one, and the sound stops. When I set it to legato triller, I press one note, then press the next note to glide up towards that next note, and then when I let it go, it's gonna drop back down again. That's the difference between legato triller and legato. So that being said, I can now go into creating this patch. I forgot to take out the filters. So that's it without the filters. Let's get started. For the first oscillator, I'm gonna select the Chrome oscillator, and I'm gonna set the bend mode, I don't know what they call this, but I'm gonna set it to bend minus plus. So we get that. Now I'm gonna go to the second oscillator, and I'm gonna make this one a duck organ. And I'm gonna set this to bend plus. Now the sound is not changing when I'm doing this because the amp is turned all the way down, but I'll get back at that as soon as possible. The third one is gonna be a big all-time favorite of me, and that is the AI oscillator, and I'm gonna set this to bend minus. Now for the filter routing settings for each oscillator, the first oscillator is basically routed a little bit more towards filter 1 than filter 2. If I double click this going back to the standard position, I'm just dragging it up a little bit, basically until the line in this slider matches the top line of the bar right next to it, right here. So on oscillator 2, I've routed almost entirely to filter 2. There's only a very tiny little bit of oscillator 2 going into filter 1. Most of it goes straight into filter 2. And for oscillator 3, I've done the exact opposite, where most of the oscillator is being sent into filter 1, while just a tiny little bit is being sent into filter 2. Now for the pitches. The pitch of oscillator 1 is going to be minus 12, and you can hold the Alt key on your keyboard while dragging this particular one down to change it in full octaves instead of semitones, which is pretty helpful. Oscillator 2 is also going to be set to -12, and oscillator 3 is going to be set to -24. So then to the modulation oscillator, I'm going to set the pitch to -24. The ring mod is going to be added to oscillator 2. The phase is going to be added to oscillator 1, position to oscillator 1, and filter FM to oscillator 1. So now we get something that sounds like. So we now get a really distorted, gritty sound. I'm definitely not happy with the way how it sounds now. So then we're gonna go to the noise oscillator, which is down here. Right now it's set to white noise, and I'm going to set this to metallic. And as you can see, I've dragged this slider down a little bit more towards filter 2 instead of filter 1. So most of the noise oscillator is being sent into filter 2. You can see I've got the amp up just a tiny little bit, and the color is basically just pointing at right past the R in color. Now if you want to have the exact same settings, please copy this section first, and then we go on to the next part. So the next part is the feedback. Be sure to turn the feedback on, because by default it's turned off. Turn it on and it's basically gonna stay all the way down. But what I'm gonna do is I'm going to connect a macro knob, and let's just pick macro knob number 6 and connect it to the feedback. And I've already set the range, but you can basically see that the range is pointing at about the bottom of the A in post A. Now macro number 6 is now controlling the amount of feedback. So when I turn this macro knob, I'm getting more and more feedback, or less. As you can see right now, I've set it to right above 9 o'clock, and that basically means that it's basically just going to add a little bit of feedback into this sound. Now I could do this with the feedback knob itself, but by doing it this way, I get basically a lot more control over the amount of feedback that's being added. So if I go above the part where the range ends right now, it starts to sound really bad, and I don't want that. So I don't need anything from here all the way around to here. So why would I use this knob if everything from here up to here is sounding fucked up? I only need this small range. So by controlling a macro knob to this knob and then selecting that range, I now get this entire range of the macro knob to control this small part of this knob. So you get a lot more precise control over that feedback setting. You can see I've set it to right above 9 o'clock. It's adding a little bit of feedback right now, and that makes it sound like this. It basically adds in a little bit more bass, a little bit more low end, which is pretty good. Yeah, I think it would be great now to set up the LFO. I've got an LFO already set up. Really basic pattern, just a simple sine wave, and I dragged the actual sine wave a little bit to the left. So we're basically changing the phase of the LFO waveform just a tiny little bit. I've set it to a ratio of 1/2, and I ticked all these boxes, the position, sync, and restart, and I brought down the amp just a little bit, so it's just above 3 o'clock. Now I'm going to connect these to some knobs. So the first thing I'm going to connect this to is the WT position on oscillator 1. I've already set the range, and the range is basically just so that the green range ends right below the S in position. I'm also gonna connect this to the intensity. This time the range is going down. Make the green range end at 9 o'clock. Then finally I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna connect the LFO5 to the amp, and it's basically just going all the way up until you see this little box at the end that basically just means like, hey, you've gone too far and your range is going beyond the end of the knob. So now with the modulation of the first oscillator set, I'm gonna bring the volume down a little bit, and it sounds like this right now. So to be honest, I cannot really say that it has become any better. It's actually become worse. But believe me, we're gonna end up with something sounding pretty decent. Let's go on to the second oscillator's modulation. I'm gonna take LFO5 and drop it onto the WT position of oscillator 2 with the range going downwards, and have the gray area, the gray end of the range be pointing at, well, about right between intensity and position, about here. So, well, you can see how far it goes. Copy the settings. I'm gonna take LFO5 and connect it to the intensity as well, with range going up at about the end of the Y in intensity, and the gray range ends about under the N in intensity. Then I'm gonna take the LFO5 and connect it to the amp knob, with a range going up to about there. Let's see, about 10 o'clock, 10:30. And that makes our sound like this. And it still isn't really becoming that much better, if you ask me. So let's go on with the third oscillator. There's no LFO gonna be connected to the WT position. I am going to connect the LFO5 to the intensity of the third oscillator, with the range going up again, and the range is gonna be ending at about pointing at the N in intensity. And then I'm going to connect the LFO5 to the amp knob, pointing at about there. So with that said, it now sounds like. So we're getting a little bit more of an interesting sound, but we're nowhere near done. The ring mod is gonna stay at this position. It's basically pointing at the little arrow, downwards arrow thing under the fine tuning, the pitch knob thingy right there. The phase is almost all the way down. It's up just a tiny little bit. A really tiny little bit. And the position is up a little bit as well. A little bit more than the phase. And I'm gonna connect the LFO5 to the position knob, with the range going up to about here, with the green part of the range ending at about the P and the O, about there. Then for the filter FM knob is all the way down, and I'm gonna connect LFO5 to this knob as well, with about the same range as the first one, as the position knob. It's pointing at about the M in FM. So now, our sound starts to sound like this. And to be honest, it's starting to become a little bit better now. So, onto the noise oscillator again. I've got LFO 5, and I'm gonna drop this onto the color knob of the noise oscillator with the range going up, like all the way. So just drag this range up all the way until you see this little box again. It's basically gonna add in a little bit more character into the sound by using that metallic kind of noise thing. I can turn off all the other oscillators, and this is how the noise sounds on its own. It's really minimal. I don't know if you can hear it. Let me bring up the volume. And that is basically just all that's happening. I'm also gonna connect the LFO 5 to the amp knob with a range going up to about 930, and that makes it sound like this. So that is what's being added into the final sound. Using noise in your sound is great to give your sound a little bit of a different character, and I can show you the difference. So this is without the noise, and this is with. It gets a little bit more of a noisy, grainy kind of character, which is pretty interesting and really useful if you want to make your sounds a little bit more different from everybody's else sounds. I mean, Massive is being used so much by so many different producers that adding in a little bit of that noise will basically just give your sound a little bit more character. And especially when you're going to process this sound further, it's gonna make a pretty big change, a pretty significant change into the final sound. So we're basically done now with this entire first section of the plugin, and we can move on into the second section, which is the one that is right here. So let me set up the filters first. The routing is basically in the middle, so it's right between a series and parallel routing of the filters. So basically we get a mix of a series filtering routing, which is like the signal comes from the oscillators, goes into filter 1 and then into filter 2 and then to the output. And a parallel routing would be the signal coming from the oscillators going into both filter 1 and filter 2 at the same time, and then the mix of the both filters is being sent to the output. So we're getting a mix of those two different ways of routing. We're basically using a mix of series routing and parallel routing together, which, you know, just gives a little bit of a different character to the sound. And it's always really helpful to basically just set this all the way up, check how it sounds like that, set it all the way down, see if it sounds any better like that, and if it doesn't, then maybe a mix of both will sound pretty good as well. The mix of the filters is also right in the middle, so we're basically getting a mix of both the output of filter 1 and filter 2, and that is being sent towards the output, or in this case the effects section. So now we can start setting up the filters. The first filter is going to be a double notch filter. Now, a notch filter is really interesting because it is basically a really sharp cut in the frequency spectrum, and you can use the cutoff knob to sweep that cut through the frequency spectrum and get a really distinctive filtering sound that you hear a lot in drum and bass and other kinds of music like dubstep and electro house. I'm going to connect LFO 5 to the filter cutoff, and I've set the range so that the end of the green part of the range ends under the U in cutoff, and that creates a sound like this. So we're getting a little bit more vocal character now because of that notch filter. So this is without the notch filter, and this is with. We're getting a lot more vocal character now, and that's pretty good. Filter 2 is going to be a comb filter, and I've already set this up. The damping is up all the way. The pitch is at about 10:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, about there, and the feedback is almost all the way down, just a tiny little bit of feedback. I'm gonna connect the LFO 5 to the pitch knob with the range going up to pointing to just before the I in pitch, and I'm gonna take the LFO 5 and gonna connect it to the feedback with the range pointing upwards as well, just a tiny little bit, and have the gray area of the range go to about 0 for this knob. So now it sounds like. So these two filters basically change the sound a lot. I mean, without the filters we have something that sounds really grainy, really noisy, and not really what we're looking for. And then with the filters we get something that sounds a lot more vocal. So now it's time to go into all the other settings. The voicing is set to 4, but right now we're getting not really that much of a strong bass sound. What this does, the voicing is set to 4, and by doing that you get multiple instances of this plugin playing at the same time. We basically get 4 different instances of this plugin doing the exact same thing, and those are being stacked up, which are the 4 voices. But the phases of the oscillator are basically going to change for each single voice. So that means that we're not getting a sound that sounds exactly the same for every time you play a note. So how can you make everything sound the same without bringing down the voices and losing that character that you get when you bring the amount of voices up? You need to go to the oscillator tab, and right here we see this part that says oscillator phases. First you need to click this restart via gate setting, click that box, and this section down below becomes active. The phase of oscillator 2 is all the way down, is basically just its default position. The phase of oscillator 1 is brought up a little bit. It's about 35-40 degrees. You can see we've got 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360 degrees, and it's basically about 35-40 degrees. The phasing of oscillator 3 is at about 170-160 degrees, like right before the 180, and the phase of the modulation oscillator is almost at 360 degrees, so it's about 340-350 degrees. That creates a sound that is much more powerful than what we had before. So I might need to bring the volume down. I don't know how loud this is going to be. So right now we get. So you can hear that we really got something much more stronger and much more usable than before. This one sounds really noisy and not really that useful. And with the restart via gate, we get with a lot more vowel character to it. So we're basically almost done. We're now just coming to the part where we need to fatten everything up a little bit. FX slot 1 is going to be a classic tube. The dry wet is at 50% and the drive is down to just above 9 o'clock. That makes the sound a little bit fatter, have a little bit more volume and a little bit more character in low end. It's basically going to add some harmonics by distorting the signal a little bit. sounds pretty great. FX slot 2 is going to be a dimension expander. I've brought the dry wet down to about 45 or about 10 o'clock, and the size is brought down all the way. So that's basically just going to widen up our sound. It's going to bring in some more stereo difference between the left and right channel, and that basically makes your bass sound a little bit more wide, and it also makes it sound a little bit fatter. So we now get brings out some of that high-end character in the bass, which is pretty helpful. As you can see, I've also changed some things in the EQ. I've brought down the low shelf, so I'm taking out some of the low frequencies. It's pointing at about the L in low shelf, and I've boosted a little bit of the mid frequencies. Now, the frequency knob is, well, at about 50%, pointing at the U in frequency, and that frequency is being boosted by this boost knob, which is, well, boosting it just a tiny little bit. Without the boost, it sounds like, and with the boost, it's a tiny little difference. Makes the low mids and the mid frequencies a little bit more prominent, which is what this sound needed. Now we can go to the inserts, the last two little modules down here below. Insert 1 is going to be a parabolic shaper, and insert 2 is going to be a sine shaper. These two modules are basically just wave shaping modules, and what wave shaping is, it's basically two different kinds of distortion. And if you don't know what wave shaping is, please just search on Google for wave shaping, and it basically shows you exactly what it is. Right now you can see the dry wet is all the way up for both of them. For the parabolic shaper, the drive knob is set to about 11 o'clock, 10:30, and for the sine shaper it's about 10 o'clock. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take macro knob number 8, and I'm going to connect this to the dry wet. Take macro knob number 8 and connect it to the dry wet, with the range going down all the way. And I'm gonna do the same for the dry wet of the sine shaper. Also, the range is gonna go down all the way. So now I have this macro knob number 8 that basically controls the amount of wave shaping that's being added. Gives us a little bit more control. We don't need to set these two knobs at the exact same position. I can basically just control this knob, and these two dry wet knobs will basically just be at the exact same position. Regarding the setting of this macro knob number 8. So I'm setting this macro knob number 8 to about 10 o'clock, which means it's adding quite a lot of distortion, because when you look at it, the default position of the dry wet knobs is all the way up. So that means that all the distortion is being added. So when I have the macro knob number 8 all the way down, we hear the sound with full distortion. And when I have the macro knob all the way up, we have it without the distortion. So by blending in that distortion, all the way was a little bit too much, so I brought it to about 10 o'clock, and that gives us a pretty heavy sound, pretty loud in volume already. So I can take this volume down a little bit of the track itself. And let's see if I got anything left I need to talk about. Yeah, I've got one more thing. If we go to the voicing tab, right here we've got this particular part. I'm going to turn on the pen position, and I'm also gonna turn on the wavetable position. So what these two do is, between each voice, and we've got 4, it's going to change the wavetable position and the pen position. So some voices are going to be penned a little bit more to the stereo sides of the audio signal, so they're going to be penned a little bit more to the sides, making the sound more stereo. And the wavetable position basically means that every voice is going to get a tiny little difference in terms of where the wavetable position knob for each oscillator is set. So it's just a tiny little difference, but it will really make you sound, well, at least sound a little bit less massive like, you know? Almost every producer uses massive, and that way a lot of the sounds that producers make do sound the same. And by adding in a little bit of that, basically just that randomizing character of this wavetable position knob, you get a little bit of a different sound, and I feel that it really makes it sound better, you know? So one thing that we can now do is take macro knob number 5, and I'm gonna connect this to the wavetable position with a range going up to about there. And now I can use this 5 macro knob to change the amount of difference between the wavetable position for each voice. So all the way down it sounds like this, and all the way up it sounds like. So that does sound different. And so let's add in a little bit of that macro knob. We can even automate this to create different effects. Then I've got macro knob number 1, and I'm going to connect this to the pen position. So when it's all the way down, we've got a monophonic sound. Now we do get a little bit of stereo character from the dimension expander, but most of the sound, the basic context of the sound is monophonic, and each single voice is still monophonic. The voices are not really panned to the sides at the moment, but when I bring up the macro knob number 1 now, we get more and more stereo character. So without it, it sounds like this, and with it, we get. So when the macro knob number 1 is up all the way, we do lose a little bit of power. So I'm going to bring it down. Let's add in just a little bit of difference between each individual voice. We still get a lot of the power, but we also get a little bit more stereo feeling, which is pretty good. And now, together with the drums, we get. So there you have it, a really interesting kill the noise kind of bass. There's no EQing yet on this, so I might, you know, drop in an EQ8, see where the frequencies are peaking. You know, high pass this. Get rid of those high mids a little bit, and maybe bring up the highs just a tiny little bit. And one more thing I now need to do is add in a little bit of sub bass. So what I can do is I can group this instance of massive, and right underneath it I can basically just duplicate this instance of massive. So we've now got 2 exact copies. On the second one I'm going to get rid of the EQ, and I'm going to open massive itself, hit file, new sound, and if I solo this we now get that. I'm going to select a sine square, and I'm gonna drag the WT position all the way down so we get a full sine wave. That sounds like that. Then I am going to bring the pitch down. That's too much. Bring it up a tiny little bit. So that's our sub bass. Add in a, let's see, add in an EQ8 right after the sub bass. Make it a low pass filter. and then I'm gonna add a saturator right after it to saturate those low frequencies a little bit. So I'm now gonna bring down the volume, and I'm gonna re-enable the first layer. Got a little bit too much sub right now. We don't need that much sub anyway with this bass sound. Most of the character and power of the bass is coming from the mid-range, but the little bit of sub frequencies aren't that bad at all. You know, your bass needs to have a little bit of sub, but there's a very big difference in amount of sub when you're making a bass like this, or when you're making a bass that has absolutely no mid frequencies. Those basses would most likely require a lot more sub to punch through mix and being perceived as a bass sound. Now this one already has quite a low character, and that mid-range really gives it a powerful character, so we don't really need that much sub to complement this bass, but a tiny little bit does make it sound a little bit better. So we've now got I can add in every single part of this sound, the slap bass. You know, it's now up to me to find out what I want to do for the next kind of bass sound. I'm thinking that, you know, something with a little, well, at least a really wide sounding lead or something would sound pretty good. I don't know what I'm gonna do for the next bass patch, so if you have any ideas for this drop, let me know what you think that's gonna sound good. So if you need this particular patch right here, I'm gonna upload it at my website. It's going to be available to all VIP members at the end of today. If you are not a VIP member, go to my website and click the VIP area menu button. That will take you to a page where you will get a little bit of explaining about what the VIP membership is and how you can also find a way how to sign up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding this video, please click the bottom left to tweet them at ARTFX Studios. Click the bottom right to go to my website, become a member, and get access to the forum where you can actually get feedback from me and other users, connect with other viewers, maybe do a collaboration with another viewer, let me hear your music, whatever, ask every question you have about music production, mastering, mixing, marketing, you name it. My website is there for you to help and to become a member from. I hope you enjoy these videos. If you have any ideas or any things you want to tell me about the videos, then please post them in a comment below. I promise you I read all my comments, and I'm getting pretty familiar with the new Google Plus commenting thing on YouTube. It's becoming a little bit more useful now. I think I'm getting it. And I really like that. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Happy producing, and see you next week.